welcome to the next episode of DDR, a podcast all about your favorite Drow, Drizzt Do'Urden. My name is Justin, and in this episode, we'll be diving deep into part 3 of Exile, titled Friends and Foes, discussing all of our favorite plot points, characters, and more.
My name is Jeffrey. Seeing as how we're huge fans of Dungeons & Dragons, one of the things that we're also going to be discussing is how parts of the chapter relate to the tabletop role-playing game that we all love to play. You know, it could be a spell that's used, maybe a trinket that's worn, or possibly even how a race appears that's used maybe differently in the game than in the book.
Yeah. Following along with the show is easy. Just grab a copy of the book, read the next part of the book, and tune in every week. But remember, we want to hear your thoughts too. You can share your dim lights with us at drizztdoneright@gmail.com.
Or, better yet, be part of the ongoing discussion on our very own Drizzt Done Right Discord. The Discord invitation is linked in the podcast description. If you raise an interesting point, we might just bring you up on our show. You know, one of the things we love to do is to throw shout-outs to the Discord.
Totally.
So, we did just get 2 new members. Wanted to say a big hello to Danny J, 92, and Cybel, 73. Welcome to the Dim Light Squad. I know I've missed a few of you guys if you come and gone. I apologize. I'm trying to get you all in there. We love you. You know, we do have a bunch of different tabs as well in the Discord. So, you know, you can go in there and see a bunch of different things, like maybe some fan art that gets shared. I know specifically we had Valeria shared an amazing picture that her sister had drawn out with Drizzt standing next to her D&D character.
So cool. So cool. In fact, I saw she also posted it on a number of Facebook Drizzt Facebook groups, and so I had to like it on there too. Like, it's such an awesome job.
I mean, I don't know if I've told you this implicitly, explicitly, but some of the of our listeners and people that follow us on Discord are also some of the people that run Drizzt Done Right, Drizzt Do'Urden, like fan pages on the Facebooks.
Yep. Totally.
So it's always kind of a fun part to know that our community gets to be able to share things inside of each other. Like, you know, I know Antics at the Armor was one we talked about. Wizards at the I'm going to butcher them all, trying to get them off the top of my head. They just started a new name on the page. But we have a bunch of people that run on here and also run a bunch of the social media pages who actually allow us to post on their web pages sometimes. So we thank you for that for sure.
Totally.
And then, you know what? As much as we like to celebrate the works of Mr. Salvatore, everybody, we love to celebrate our listeners as well. So get into the Discord. Go be part of the ongoing discussion.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, here we are, part 3. That is out of 5, right? We have 5 total in book 2.
I really like the format, by the way. I'm not going to lie.
I think it's working pretty well. I already said on the Discord, planning each of these takes a lot more time.
It does.
Because we're
but
covering
I think
so
we're
many more
condensing
chapters.
so much more time than we would have. And, you know, I really enjoy being able to sit back and go through these with you, as well as being able to sit back and kind of craft the fun of it for the listeners. I feel that we're still being able to put out a fun episode and get into all the fun in detail. But by looking at it in parts, I don't know, the speed of it is something I'm enjoying.
Well, I think it makes a lot more sense because people can, and we as well, can read like a chapter a day and still miss like a day here or there and keep up on this pace, right? Before it was 1 chapter a week, like that's a snail's pace. I don't know.
It was.
It seems to be working out really well. So if anyone has any suggestions for that, any comments about our new format, just let us know. Again, get on that Discord page and let us hear them. So, Jeffrey, what have you been doing lately?
Well, you know, I took up the green apron. Been making some coffee over at Starbucks. Having a good time. Learning how to make espressos.
Do you want to shout out your location so we can all come get some
I don't even know what the
from you?
store number it would be for that. But, you know, if anybody is in the Maryland, Baltimore area, by all means, shoot a message over into our Discord. Find me up, and I'll let you know where you can come get an espresso poured by one of the hosts of the show. Absolutely. We'll do a little interaction moment. They can come get me.
That would be awesome. Hey, I might come down.
Right? But no, it's been fun learning the science to coffee, I guess. You know, the little bit more of the bourgeois class of coffee, because I've always been the Folgers in a cup, drink it black kind of guy. Because Weight Watchers tells me that there's a high fat content in my creamer and the stuff that makes the coffee taste wonderful. So I get used to just drinking it black because at the end of the day, it's about that coffee, the caffeine, right? Caffeine. Yeah, that go-go juice.
Well,
if the people
I'll
on
tell you
YouTube
what,
are
like,
looking, drinking it right now. Hey guys.
Nice. No, I mean, if you can make a good cup of coffee, it doesn't need all that stuff in it. All the cream and sugar, you don't need that. I find that when I'm out camping, you're making Folgers coffee, right? And it definitely needs something to cover up that burnt flavor that you have going on there. But a nice cup of French press, freshly ground coffee goes a long way in the morning. So that's usually what I do.
I'm actually drinking the Antigua blend right now from Starbucks, and it comes with a very light, refreshing taste on the back, so you don't get the bitter part of the coffee. You get more of the, It's not a blonde roast, but it's considered a medium, but it has more of a blonde roast flavor to it, where it comes off cleaner on the palate with a little bit of a citrusy taste.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool. So for that, I kind of flooded this one with a little bit of caramel macchiato creamer. But normally it's just, a cup of that's nice and smooth on the tongue in the morning. It's not too acidic.
Nice. That's awesome.
What have you been up to, buddy?
Well, work is work. I have a qualification book where I need to get 320-ish signatures.
Oh, I'll sign it for you.
Well, from people that are qualified themselves to say hey, he did that job, sign, you did it correctly, and they hit it, and 320 of them. So I'm hoping to be done by January or so, but this week I racked in my first breaker, which is super awesome, but yet super scary because throughout training the whole time, bless you, throughout training, they talk about how when you rack these in, they will explode and kill you and hurt the whole time you're dying. And it's just okay. But it's as long as you're following the procedure, it's perfectly safe. It's perfectly fine. It's the plant that I'm at has been open since the late 80s, early 90s. It's 2 units. And what is it? They had one breaker explode when I guess it was 2, wasn't it? There was one that exploded when no one was around, and another one exploded that was close enough for other people to hear, but they weren't actually near it. And it's just ooh, yeah, that's kind of scary. But anyway.
That is 2 more explosions than I would ever want in my nuclear reactor.
Well, yeah. I mean, it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't in the nuclear reactor. It had nothing to be nuclear related.
Way more dramatic when I say it that way. So you're saying there were these loud, giant explosions?
Well, just any kind of little short. I think the one was caused by just over time. Again, they're over 40 years old, or close to 40 years old, I guess, over 30 years old. And after so long, some of the wires just vibrating in place eventually wears through the insulation on the wire and creates a short after so many years, and then all of a sudden it's just just bursts into flame and creates a big plasma ball. But again, 2 out of the past 30 plus years, perfectly safe normally. All right. That's one of the reasons why, when you pull them out, you inspect it to make sure it's not doing that sort of thing. So that's why it's in the procedure now to make sure that doesn't happen again.
When do we mention your power plant mascot, Baba, the 2-headed goat, 1 ba for each head, huh? We just forget the fact that he walks around grazing on the clover all day.
See, we don't talk about the 2-headed deer that we have.
We don't talk about Bruno. All right, buddy. What do you say we go kick this show off?
Yeah, let's start this off with the insight check. All right, that's where we are going to roll an insight check to investigate the inner monologue of Drizzt. So this week, this insight check, it started off with to live or to survive. And that just really resonated with me. That line.
It's actually the name of my 1989 heavy metal album, To Live or to Survive.
And that short quote just kind of resonates throughout the whole insight check. So let's take a little further look into this. So after a life in Menzoberranzan, Drizzt thought life to be only about survival, right? But that survival instinct is ultimately what almost killed Drizzt when he was in the Underdark by himself. Before Blingden Stone, that is.
Right.
All right?
When he was just the hunter.
Right, exactly. Yeah. That survival instinct, the hunter, right? So then after spending some time in Blingden Stone, we still got a little bit of that haunting presence of the hunter in him, kind of sneaking out a little bit. But after spending some time in Blingden Stone, Drizzt learned that life was more than just about survival. It was about living. It was about laughing. I almost said it was about loving, you know?
It's a Julia Roberts movie, right?
It was about living, laughing, and working, which makes sense. Deep gnomes, they love to work. They're going out, they're mining, like that's part of their lifestyle.
Like crisscross with the the Snow White dwarves.
Yeah.
Because I mean they love the gemstones, right? And they
whistle
have
while you work,
yes,
right?
That's what I'm saying.
You know,
not just the the idea of looking at it, but just that passion that they have for the stone and the way that they look at it, the reverence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then they wake up in the morning, hi ho. You know what I mean? You could just see it. I could see it.
Absolutely. Totally. Life, it was about sharing your gains and sharing the pain of loss. Because really, like, they're living in the Underdark here. Loss is inevitable. It's going to happen. So that was all part of life. That was all part of what Drizzt had learned while in Blingden Stone. And when Drizzt left Blingden Stone, he left with high hopes. This time, as he entered the Underdark, he wasn't accompanied by the hunter. You know, maybe the hunter, this merciless being that's taking shelter in Drizzt's subconscious, maybe it's still lurking in his subconscious. But now he's being accompanied by someone that would bring laughter and meaning into his world. Of course, he also has Guinevere.
Right. Interesting thought. Do you think that, having known now the mind of Drizzt, look, well, different than Drow, right? As he's progressed, that hunter that he mentions there, it's kept at bay by the friendship that he has, the love with Guinevere, and the same companionship he finds with Belwar. Do the other Drow just never find that? They all also have maybe this, hunter inside of them, but eventually being surrounded by all the perils of Menzoberranzan, it takes over and wins, and they're never able to find that light and love in their world, so that they become their hunter, which isn't as good as Drizzt's hunter because he's, unparalleled. But do you think that maybe it's the corruption or the tainting of their, not soul, but you know what I'm saying, their character?
Right.
But Drizzt is able to find this ray of hope that maybe if he never found Guinevere, he would have been overtaken by it by himself. Like, never would have been pulled out of it to go to Blingden Stone in the first place.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That's interesting. No, I think I understand what you're asking there. No, that is very interesting. And the first other Drow that comes to mind that could possibly be battling a similar type situation would be Vierna, being somewhat similarly wired to Drizzt. Does she have also an inner hunter? That she's
because we did see her turn away from the feelings, the emotions.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I don't know, but that's very interesting to think about, the idea that all the Drow are kind of like at a certain point, maybe the academy, where
that
the
brainwashing
hunter
and everything
sets in and kind of takes over, and the other Drow is left behind in the subconscious, and kind of, that's really cool.
I didn't plan that, by the way. It just came up when you were talking, and I was like, that is a neat comparison, that he thinks it's kind of like his own humanity being stripped away and given away to the base urges and needs of the hunter, and it's going to consume him. And we'll touch back on that later when I get to my dungeon delve, because I do look into some of the parts of this chapter a little deeper. But is that something that is like, to everyone, and it's not maybe so specific to Drizzt?
Yeah, I don't know. That's very interesting. Hey, if anyone's listening to this episode Jump on that Discord and let us know
We
what
know
you
you're
think.
listening. I see the stat.
Someone's listening, unless everyone's just downloading and never listening to us.
We're going to get email that are like, all I do is press play and walk away. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Didn't even know that was the status of a show. We're a press play and walk away. Wow, what is that?
That's what we should title this now. All right. So that's the insight check. Let's go ahead and jump into the next part of the show, the Drizzt. The Drizzt. It's the part of the show where we take a look at the next part of the book and we give you the Drizzt of it. So, chapter 12, titled Wild, Wild, Wilds, Drizzt and Belwar are now exiled from Blingdenstone, and they're scheming as to what their first steps should be in their new adventure. They decide that it would be best to construct a fake campsite that is meant to lure Drizzt's family away from Blingdenstone, and then head west, basically the opposite direction of Menzoberranzan. Get as far away as possible, as quickly as possible. They travel for at least a 10-day, well, within the region that Belwar has ventured out in. Well within the region that Belwar has ventured out in. He's already been this far out, right?
Yeah.
But he's soon to be Samwise Gamgee in the Fellowship of the Ring. If I take another step, I'll be as far, you know what I'm talking about.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. He's right at the limits of his, and then everyone will be a new measure.
Right. Which total sidestep here. I once saw a YouTube video of the Fellowship of the Ring, but every time Samwise Gamgee takes a step, it replays that whole scene. Whereas, like, if I take another step, it'll be like the furthest from home that I've ever been, and it's like it was like 9.5 hours long or something like that. Anyway,
with all reverence towards that movie, it was a huge part of my coming of age, whatever you want to call it.
Me too.
Loved
Yeah,
loved those movies, bro. When people lampoon those movies, there's just so much material, and it's great. It's so much of it's hilarious.
Yeah, totally.
Go ahead.
So. For those 10 days, that one 10-day, I should say, they're swapping stories. Belwar's stories usually consist of the type of ores that were harvested from the cavern that they're currently walking through, right? While Drizzt is sharing stories from his days training with Zaknafein. During their travels, Guinevere kept the perimeter safe while traveling, and sometimes even while bedding down for the night. One night, Drizzt formulated a plan to prank Belwar and commanded the 600-pound panther to lay down and fall asleep on Belwar.
Commanded is like a strong term there, because I feel like he suggested it, and Gwen kind of smirked, like, yeah, I'm in.
But Belwar could only release muffled shouts from underneath all that fur and muscle. And Drizzt acted like he didn't want to disrupt their playtime. And it was just such a fun little window into in this dangerous journey through the Underdark, right? Just
I love how
so
like
comical.
he has those thoughts and it shows you that, but he completely deadpans it.
Yeah,
so he
absolutely.
sets this fun, playful moment up and walks in like, oh,
yeah,
you guys are having fun? No, I would not. I wouldn't want to. You just go about whatever you're doing. I'll leave. Don't worry. And like, you know what I mean? Like you were like, wow, this stoic drow, and inside he's like, he's laughing raucously.
Love it. A few days later, they stumble upon an open cavern filled with crimson spitters, Baruchis.
Is that how you say it? That's not how I read it.
That's how my audiobook pronounced it.
Excellent. I was wondering, because for me, I was like, Baruchi? Like, I mean,
if I only read it, I probably would have thought Baruchi. But my
there's
audiobook
just something
anyway.
fun in my head about Baruchi and this giant thing you're going to get to coming around like Studio Ghibli.
Yeah.
Like
technically Studio Ghibli.
See, there it goes. Yeah. But like the animation of this giant thing coming along, like, it just made me... Baruchi!
No, for years I called it Studio Ghibli, and then it's just like I look online and it's like, oh, people apparently say it's Ghibli. So, okay.
Yep, and that's how you know you're a noob, because everyone's like, it's Ghibli, jerk.
So they get to these Baruchis, and Drizzt had no idea what they were. So Belwar was quick to show just how deadly the mushrooms were. He also informed Drizzt that worm-like creatures called grubbers usually lived amongst the Baruchis, but, grubbers are basically just huge docile worms. This information was, of course, Belwar's response to Drizzt's prank with Gwen the other night. In reality, these worms were very territorial. The enormous worm almost ran down and spread Drizzt across the cavern floor like Wile E. Coyote getting run over by an Acme truck. They made their escape to a tiny dead-end corridor where Belwar cut through the stone to an adjacent passage. A few days later, the Drow and the Svirfnebli encountered a green glow down a side tunnel and couldn't help but investigate it. It was an underground lake of acid, probably the result of a failed wizard's experiment, because they both were under the impression that, like, acid isn't naturally occurring. Like, why would this... But in reality, I mean, it kind of is. Maybe not in that concentration.
Science!
So while making their way across the narrow walkways above the acid lake, all exits were suddenly cut off by these drow bird-like people called corgis. Yep. I mean, corbies.
What? Who?
Every time I read corbies, I could only think corgis, and I'm just like imagining all these like humanoid dog type creatures. And I'm just like, that doesn't
with
seem
the short
as
hindquarters.
It doesn't seem as scary, but yeah. I mean, yeah, those things were terrifying looking.
I gotta admit, as this played out, I originally had an idea of like those people from Kong, that are dressed like very cavish.
Oh, right.
And I was like, but they're bird-like people, right? So they're probably going to be flapping and flying. So Go ahead, continue as we see what happens.
So they were going to have to fight their way out of this situation, right? There were, I mean, it was a terrifying situation. Here they are, narrow bridges sort of over top of this lake of acid, and these bird people squawking around yelling, "Doom, doom!" And I'm just like, oh, this is so creepy. Then I guess that's the end of chapter 12. We move into 13, titled A Little Place to Call Home. Drizzt is overtaken by the hunter, and he ran from... Or no, they actually battled at the end of 12, didn't they? There was a whole battle.
Toward the end of it, because you see Belwar is like, come on, buddy, you can do it.
Yeah, I just totally cut that out of here. I guess that was an option for a dim light, and so I didn't want to step on the toes too much. But yeah, there was the whole battle where Drizzt was like being careful. He didn't want to kill them. He was attacking
with the flats of his blade. He
was like defending himself rather than assaulting.
I think at one point it mentions that Belwar is on like foe number 6 or 10, something like that.
Right.
And then he notices that Drizzt is still fighting the first.
Hasn't dropped one, right?
Yeah.
And it took what it took for Drizzt to start fighting back.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh because it's a tough one, but go ahead.
Well, like Guinevere got thrown into the acid.
Not quite thrown. So you remember, it was something like out of a Mad Max type future where those little gas guys go and do crazy stuff from car to car.
Oh, right.
This bird person at the top of this giant cavern.
That's right.
Grabs a rock and just jumps.
Just dive bombed. I forgot about that.
Right through the bridge, and evidently it's like this ecstasy filled suicidal fervor that they get into. So like, doesn't matter whether or not it's gonna hit. They're so exalted and over the top about the fact that they're dive bombing that they're like, woo, and they have no other care for anything else in this world other than dive bombing with that rock as it goes down. So it catches the bridge, and Guinevere is like, it's like cats on a marble.
What are you
floor.
gonna do? Yeah.
Just and whoop,
back
down off the side into the acid.
Right.
Then Drizzt notices because his pocket, the figurine smokes, and he just that's where he just gives in, kind of, because he's
Yep,
fighting off that turn of the hunter.
Yep.
Because he doesn't want it. He doesn't want to give in, really. He doesn't want to give up control.
Right, but that's where the hunter does take over.
Yeah, well, once his rage gets, like, he realizes, like, again, there's, like, so many times where, like, when Guinevere is hurt, or when someone Drizzt cares about is in peril, that switch clicks and he just goes.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, he just destroys a number of them, only enough, from what I remember, to basically get out of the situation. Right?
Well, at first he's like just a buzzsaw chewing them
right,
up. And then when he makes the jump, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping on the part, when he makes the jump across from the bridge to Belwar, then they just cut their way out.
Right, that's what I mean.
Before that, he is literally just standing there like a blender. That was my noise for the quick cuts for the people who aren't watching, and as I make the hand motions, so he's just blur of blades, just basically like trying to kill everything in front of him.
Yeah, and I mean, eventually, like you said, the hunter takes over. Drizzt jumps over to this other bridge with Belwar, and they make their escape. They have to like break through this door at the end of the bridge to get not an actual door, but a bunch of Corbies are standing at the end of the bridge, and they have to cut through them. It was so terrifying. And
we just then repeat the entire time we talk about the corgis in the background.
Right. The corgis or the Corbies?
No, the corgis now.
And then they're running down the corridor, running from the Corbies, and they run for quite a distance before they end up with Belwar's in tow. Like, he's way far. I feel like he's way far behind. Drizzt is just taking off. And confident that they were far enough from battle, Belwar had to break Drizzt's rage to get him to stop. Drizzt was embarrassed at how he started the battle using the flats of his scimitars, right? Mm-hmm. But he was equally perturbed by the fact that the hunter was still lurking within his head. This was the first time that Drizzt had the hunter sneak up on him since the basilisk fight, the fake basilisk fight. I believe, as far as we know, right?
Right.
Then he remembered the instance that triggered his rage. Guinevere. So reluctantly, but eagerly, Drizzt summoned Gwen to make sure she was okay. She was alive, but she had some very serious wounds. I just feel like, she had some skin showing, just like fur, just all burned off.
The thing he said was like more burned skin showing than fur.
Right. Yeah.
So like you're talking
like a eye hanging from its socket.
Yep. That eye, because the one is, what was it like? It said it was like the damage blurred it, like covered it or something like that. Like, I can't remember. Yeah, like one eye gone, all this fur just patched its skin. It's like it's basically like when the gremlin gets thrown into water and starts to bubble and change, and all this funky stuff happens, and it's like,
right.
Oh man, my heart broke at that moment picturing Gwen in that kind of distress.
Absolutely. I don't know how I left that from the Drizzt. I don't know what I was thinking. Excuse me. So yeah, she had some very serious wounds. So Drizzt dismissed her and promised to allow her to rest for a few days before summoning her again. Because, there is an understanding here that her home, the astral plane, is a place where time is different and she seems to heal faster there. So that's the whole point.
You think it's like
that.
She seems to heal faster because like time moves faster there. So like a day here is a month there. So really, she's in pain the entire time, going through the entire process you need to heal at regular time for her whole existence. But Drizzt is like, 24 hours. Yeah, no, that should do it. Click, time's up. Like,
it's like, now I don't have to listen to a complaining panther for a month.
So if you got any other questions about time travel and how it works, you can go ahead and fire that email over to drizzdoneright@gmail.com.
So after Drizzt sends Guinevere back to her home, we get a glimpse as to what zombie Zaknafein has been up to. The Wraith understood that the camp that Drizzt and Belwar set up was just that. It was a setup, right? But he remained there anyway for several days in the off chance that Drizzt would happen to return. Then back at House Do'Urden, Malice continues to control the Wraith. Apparently, the zombie acts on its own accord based on its own emotions, but Malice is able to send commands from a distance every once in a while. So Zaknafein continued to inspect the campsite and the surrounding corridors. He deduced that Drizzt, and possibly someone else, had moved west and must be a 10-day or two ahead of him. No matter, Zach doesn't need to sleep or rest. Like, he's the Energizer Bunny. He's just going and going and going.
Can we talk about the sudden humor that's made its way into this book? I believe when we find Zach and he finds the encampment, it's expressed that the bedroll is being sliced up by his swords.
Oh,
like
that's
some kind
right.
of
Yeah,
Edward
yeah.
Scissorhands approach, where like the bedroll is like, all over like, Zach's zombie head, and he's like, I can't cut my way out of this. Like, don't know what to do. And it's like, really? It's such a funny image to me. Like, something from like the Friday the 13th movies when they got past number 7 or whatever and leaned into the humor of the movies,
Right.
Like, did he really grab that guy in the sleeping bag and start swinging it off the tree? What? Did he beat that guy with another guy? What? It just made you stop because it's like, wait a minute, is Zaknafein, like, he knows it's set up, but instead of just nudging it with his boot, he's got to throw it up in the air like the world's largest pizza and start stabbing it. Like, okay.
All right. And then we go back to Drizzt and Belwar, where they find a curious creature, like none that Drizzt had ever set eyes on before. It was
That's
human.
a good lead up. You swerved me. I thought we were going somewhere else, but yeah, I like it.
Human, the first human, right? Drizzt's first human. Belwar knew this human, living alone in the Underdark, was probably a wizard. Didn't know this human, but he knew that most humans that live in the Underdark are going to be wizards, right? Sorry, I worded that really poorly, or said that really poorly. So, yeah.
I never realized how much wizards and homeless people have in common. You might find both of them in large, open, underground caverns, muttering to themselves, a danger to others around them. Like,
maybe not all wizards, but definitely this one, right? Like, this one just seems like
a
little
unique,
off his,
man.
a little off in the head there.
I couldn't help but picture it as like a cinematic again, and then try to think like, who would you cast to play like this type of wizard? And like, I would like to see like a Willem Dafoe type over the top character. Oh yeah,
totally. Oh man, he would be
run.
Yeah, he'd be great
because you need that wizard. Angular face.
Yeah.
The
totally.
Aged look. You can't have anybody too young, and it's like just
he would need
able
a wig.
to mutter, rant, and yell at the same time.
He would need a wig, maybe a scraggly beard, and oh yeah, totally. So, they knew it was a wizard, so they probably should be careful, right? Despite this, Belwar allowed Drizzt to interact with the human.
Yeah, let him go. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, it was just like, trial by fire. The interaction went south, ending with the wizard disappearing and casting a spell similar to Fireball. That's how I interpreted it. That's what it sounded like. Belwar and Drizzt dove into a nearby stream to avoid the explosion. When they emerged, they decided it would be better to run than to continue to deal with this random encounter, right? That's
smart move.
Sometimes that's a very smart move, right?
Yeah, underutilized in D&D, if we're being
totally.
honest.
Like when you guys ran into that ice salamander thing that I threw at you, I was just like, oh shoot, this thing is gonna kill them. And you're just like, guys, we need to run. It's like, yes, good. So they traveled a couple days after this encounter. They traveled for a couple days to a 3-chambered cavern with an underground lake. Belwar immediately thought it looked like home. So here there was plenty of clean water, plenty of food in the form of plants, mosses, fish, and best of all, crabs. A huge 12-foot crab emerged from the lake. Like, that would be terrifying. That would be like, nope, this isn't home. No way. This is Starship Troopers. I'm out of here.
Instead, these 5-foot tall, shorter for the gnome, individuals decided to go attack this 12-foot large crab, and hey, let's Red Lobster this up. Give me a side of butter and we can eat crab for months.
But where are they getting the butter? Gotta get those rothe back, yeah?
Yeah. Also, another totally unscripted point, if you would like to cheer upon those jokes, send the email to drizzdoneright@gmail.com. Go ahead, Justin.
Or you can just clap. Just give us applause. We'll hear it. Trust me.
Send a video of you clapping. That would make our day.
Belwar and Drizzt spent the next few days at the lake setting up their new home and eating crab. Not crabs, crab, because they got one of the 12-foot crabs.
I imagine they had that Forrest Gump attempt to crab, like crab soup, crab gumbo, crab shrimp, crab and rice. It's just crab in every imaginable way you can think of. Crab right? On crab, etouffee, 3 ways.
So meanwhile, Zaknafein reached the field of Baruchis and the Grubber. Since he didn't need to breathe, he walked right through. And when the Grubber attacked, he jumped on the oversized worm, much like a Fremen riding a sandworm, and sliced into its thick hide. Jeffrey, please tell me you know what a Fremen is.
Yeah, no, it's in Dune.
Okay, good.
Dune 2 coming up.
Yeah,
November, we're going to have a watch party for that.
Oh, totally. I loved the first one.
Oh, yeah.
All right, back with
when Zach got to this worm, because he levitates, right? Is what they did.
Right,
he jumps up, levitates, and then plops down on his back. All I could think is, like, this thing made Drizzt be like, nope, and then, like, cartoon skedaddle out of the way. And then Zach is like, nah, I shall levitate about 12 feet. Yep, 12 feet looks good. And then as it comes under me, wait for it, drop and kill it.
I'm going to ride this thing. Yeah, I'm going to ride this thing to its death.
Even take a pause or a beat. Just did it.
Yep. And then back with Drizzt and Belwar,
same guy had to fight his way out of a bedroll that he knew was a ruse. But rubber, gone.
So then back with Drizzt and Belwar, a Hookhar stumbles into the cavern. That would be terrifying. But,
yeah,
I mean, something's different about this thing. Drizzt expertly snuck up behind the creature and began to expertly take the 10-foot monster down.
In an expert-like fashion.
But to Drizzt's surprise, the creature's face was drenched with horror.
Nice words.
As the creature spoke in Drow, "Please don't kill me." It's just like, what? Hookhars can talk? Right? Like, at first you're just like, whoa, this Hookhar is like, what? Then we move into chapter 14.
Like, this is a shaman Hookhar, right? Like, what's different about this one? Like, is this a general? Like, we've seen Hookhars before. What's going on?
Now, I should say the voice that I use for the Hookhar is not the voice I would use for a normal Hookhar. See, I already know what's coming, and so I'm just like, okay. This thing that is actually what turned into a Hookhar is, that's what it would sound like.
Okay, but what would the Hookhar sound like?
Oh, I have no idea. Probably.
How do you know it doesn't sound like that?
Well, I'm thinking it would be more bird-like, because they have like beaks and everything. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm not about to attempt that on recording without practicing.
Just gonna need you to give your best improv shot at
it. Next week I'll improv that. Wink. Chapter 14 is titled Clacker. Hey, turns out it's not a Hookhar after all. The creature. That's
what you were saying.
The creature actually used to be something called a petch. Again, that's how my audiobook
this whole time I was calling it a peck.
Right, exactly. But this petch is apparently a gnome-like creature, but was transformed into a Hookhar by an evil human wizard. Perhaps the same one.
You cannot trust humans.
Perhaps the same one that Drizzt and Belwar ran into days prior? Like, really, right? So Drizzt was sympathetic for the being and invited it to stay down below their home near the lake. Belwar grew concerned that Clacker would eventually complete his metamorphosis from Petch into full Hookhar, but Drizzt, having been through 10 years of isolation, would not allow anyone else to to suffer that same fate that he had to, right?
Yeah.
That night, Drizzt couldn't sleep and eventually woke Belwar to a plan to hunt down the wizard that cursed Clacker and force the wizard to reverse the spell. Belwar warned Drizzt of the strength of the wizard, but never said no before he drifted off to sleep. Right?
Do you remember the dream he woke up to?
Oh, shoot.
Because he woke up, and now I'm having trouble remembering if it was him having to kill Clacker or if he was dreaming that Belwar had to kill Clacker. Because because Belwar was explaining to him when he fell asleep that basically if Clacker completes his metamorphosis, then like one of you would have to kill him, and you'd rather him stay out there and be able to avoid him.
Okay.
Than to let him in here with us, and then if he turns, you have to kill him. And it's like, so Drizzt wakes up to this nightmare of like having to do exactly that, and that's when he turns to Belwar and he's like, "Bro, look, we gotta," and then moves forward.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. That's some good motivation there, right? So the group then set out in search of the wizard. They searched for about a 10-day when they came upon a cavern that had a shape cut out of the roof. Clacker informed Drizzt and Belwar that the wizard carries a tower with him.
Yeah, and when you say that, my mind pictures this wrong every time because it's a cutout of the cavern. But I always picture like it's punched through, so there's an opening to the world above it because the cutout to the cavern. It's not what it says.
Oh, it's just saying solid like there's rock, right?
Yeah, like there's an indentation up there, so you know that this tower moves in size.
Right.
Like what? It's telescopic.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Like I said, Clacker informed Drizzt that the wizard carries this tower and, like, sets it up even where it doesn't fit. Hence, the cutout in the ceiling.
Yep.
So, for several more days, the group searched for the wizard, eventually finding a 30-foot tall adamantine tower. Before they could make a plan...
Can I ask you real quick?
Oh, yeah.
When they said tower, how big were you thinking? Because I was picturing, like, the Superman Fortress of Solitude tower, like, big.
No, I wasn't thinking quite that big. I was thinking,
really?
Like,
okay. Because, like, 30 feet to me strikes me as it's basically 2 stories.
It's a building,
floor
right?
You walk in on the floor above it. Technically, you could have a third floor because they don't have to be 10-foot floors. But
yeah, 30 seems kind of small to call it a tower, but...
Yeah. I mean, it does fill all the prerequisites. Don't get me wrong. It's just when you just said 30 feet, it strikes me as like, man, oh my gosh, what is that in every movie? We're like, I thought it'd be bigger.
I mean, I guess it would be a tower if everything else around it is small, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe they mean it in like just looks like the crenulated tower when it goes up. That, like the corner of the castle just removed by itself.
So as far as like this sounds like the most stereotypical wizard tower in D&D, especially like it's magical enough that you can pick it up and walk it with you and then set it up wherever you want.
Well, I imagine it I don't know about you. I imagine it just shrinks to this little like onyx like figurine.
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure. But yeah, just I don't know that you necessarily see many buildings that are over one story in the Underdark very often. I mean, I know like in Menzoberranzan, you did need to levitate up.
Right.
You did need to levitate up to get to the second story at least. But I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, that's in a big city. It's not like you're walking across the Underdark and you just came across the thatch village of the Pesh.
Right.
Petches?
I don't know.
Pesce?
Peshai?
No. The Joe Pesci.
But yeah, what I thought was interesting is this tower is made of adamantine, right?
Wolverine.
So it's just the strongest known metal in this world, right? But before they could make a plan, Clacker just started attacking the door. But of course, it was no use because adamantine, right? Worse though was the fact that the wizard now knew that they were there. Drizzt made his way to an arrow slit and just managed to hear an incantation from the other side. First, Drizzt threw a large rock up toward the arrow slit to intercept the lightning bolt that was coming out of it. Then he held Gwennevar's stone. I thought this was so cool. Held the stone up to the arrow slit and summoned Gwen into the tower.
Yes.
And with Gwen in the tower, the wizard was quick to allow the group in. He's just So quick to surrender.
What I love is that he throws the rock up and intercepts the lightning bolt, and the wizard says something along the lines of, "Oh, I hate when that happens," as if this happens on a semi-regular basis. Like, hold on. This guy is such a bad wizard that he's firing off lightning bolts. Like, I got myself again. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
They convince the wizard to change Clacker back into a Petch. But the wizard revealed that he killed a bunch of other Petch. Basically, like, I should have killed him along with the rest of them.
But now, Clacker knew this. He told this to Drizzt and Belwar.
Right, but like...
Bringing it back up, you think? Just
bringing it back up, absolutely. Okay. Brings that rage back, And now he's a more powerful creature and everything. Before, when he was first changed to a Hookar,
it was like the Avengers, when Thanos talks to Star-Lord, and Star-Lord's like, "Murr!" and just decides to like lose his mind and try to kill Thanos and messes up the plan, and then people get snapped in half. That part,
so mad.
Yep, and it reminds me of that because it's like there's Clacker, and he knows the plan, and then all of a sudden he just lost it.
You just destroyed the plan.
Rational
Clacker.
Thought, because he's not a Hookar. He's going through this thing and can't really help himself.
Right. Yeah. So. Then Clacker ended up killing the wizard before the spell was undone. And it's just like, really, Clacker?
An insanely graphic manner, by the way.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Like, you can't identify the wizard afterwards.
Yeah. So the group returned home, finding nothing useful within the wizard's tower. Belwar and Drizzt didn't speak it, but they both realized how Clacker's outbursts are uncharacteristic of Petch, but are more characteristic of Hookars, which is definitely concerning. Chapter 15 then starts with Matron Malice interrogating Jarlaxle for any new information that he has learned about Drizzt. Jarlaxle, of course, knows much, but discloses only a little to Matron Malice. The spirit wraith Zaknafein has been hunting for some time now. She recognizes that Jarlaxle does not intend on sharing anything more just yet, so she dismisses Jarlaxle and continued tuning into the emotions of the spirit wraith. The only thing she could do to control the zombie, right? Uh-huh. What's crazy then is Jarlaxle then went straight to Matron Bayenray and disclosed even more information than he did to Matron Malice. He informed her that Drizzt is heading west of Blingdenstone. Matron Bayenray's Mind Flayer friend was present at the time, took that information, and immediately sent out some sort of warning to the area by projecting its thoughts. Like, okay. Like, as soon as I saw this, I'm just like, okay, how many Mind Flayers are out there?
Bro, you just totally blew my mind with a visual image of Mind Flayer Wi-Fi.
I feel like it would go out. It would sound like Morse code, like beep 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 beep.
Listen, Johnny, we're going to go and invade on Tuesday at 4, okay? One of those old-timey radios in the 60s.
Right, yeah.
Tell them we got the destroyers parked on the side, yeah?
Back at the underground lake, Drizzt has been calling home. The underground lake that Drizzt has been calling home for a few days now. Zaknafein finally arrived. He burst through the front door and started rampaging, only Drizzt was nowhere to be found. Zak's instincts were to wait, but Matron Malice was growing impatient. The wraith took off in the direction the group left, only for the group to arrive back to the lake house just a few hours later via a different route. When they saw the
mindless zombie knew better than the Drow matron.
Totally, he totally did. He wanted to sit and wait.
Be learned there.
But Matron Malice is getting impatient, so get out there and find him. But if she would have just let him sit, then things would have been different. So when they saw that their house was destroyed, they grabbed a few supplies and continued west to put more distance between them and Menzoberranzan. The trio reached a portion of the Underdark that seemed even more quiet than normal Underdark corridors, which must be saying something, right?
Yeah.
As a precaution, Drizzt levitated up into the stalactites in the ceiling of the cavern, only to be met with an illithid ambush. Mental energy rushed over Drizzt, incapacitating him and sending his scimitars to the ground. A portal opened in front of Belwar and Clacker, as more mind flayers emerged from it. I say more because there were, the illithids, that's mind flayers, in case you don't know. Belwars, I don't know, not everyone
No,
might
you're
know
absolutely right to say that. You're that not everybody, may be up on the terminology as well. You're right.
Belwar was also stunned by the mental energy spells, but Clacker, having already been in an unstable mental state, seemed to be resistant to the mental damage. The blasts, however, eventually, they were relentless, and the Hookhars eventually dropped him. Or the Hookhar eventually dropped. Part 3 of the book ended with Drizzt, Belwar, and Clacker being captured by the Mind Flayers.
It's such a good cliffhanger. It's neat
it was insane.
See, like, up until this point, you've seen one Mind Flayer, and he's always been kind of demure and reserved, playing the role of maybe companion, maybe underling, maybe master puppet to House Bane, right? And then suddenly, like, they're involved. They're very involved.
And one thing I wish we would have done back at the beginning of episode 1, or have another episode 1, the first episode for this book, I kind of wish we talked more about you can't see it, the cover of this book. I don't know if you took the time to look at it, but the cover of this book is this scene.
Is it?
Yeah, where Drizzt is like up in the stalactite, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mind flayers all like floating above or floating around with him there.
Little overkill.
Which I'm just like, but it's just like, we probably should have had another quote episode 0 at the beginning of this book, just to kind of like talk about the cover, to talk about the prelude.
So for next book, do you think that we should just put together a cobbled little idea here, that we look at the front of the book and try to guess what's about to happen or something like that?
I kind of think we should do something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a long episode. It could just be a pre-book teaser. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of what do we think we're getting into.
And we could also talk about the prelude a little bit, which in episode 1 I kept calling the prologue, but the prologue comes at the end of the book. So I got that a little mixed up, but
no, the epilogue comes at the end of the book.
Epilogue. What's a prologue?
Prologue is at the beginning of the book.
Is it?
Before the dialogue.
Okay. Because
you're thinking though of the prelude comes before that, I believe. Prelude, prologue, dialogue, epilogue. That is me just making that up, guys. If you are listening on the podcast, if you are watching, let me wave to you. Hey guys, go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong. Shoot that into the email.
I'm looking right now. It is called a prelude. I don't know where the prologue is though, but anyway, in this book, it's called a prelude.
Okay.
So anyway, we should probably have an episode quote 0 at the start of each book just to cover that stuff. But anyway, that is the Drizzt. Let's go ahead and move into the dim light reel.
The dim light is where we cast darkness on our favorite parts from this week, and then dim light all of our favorite characters, events, descriptions, and more. So for me, there really wasn't much of a choice for my dim light. I just went straight with Clacker. I was so drawn to this character, this part of the book. We'll get into it even more. So at the end of chapter 13, we see Drizzt and Belwar come upon a Hookhar. And, Drizzt has engaged them before, so he understands that the best way to fight them is to use the element of surprise and then press that advantage.
Yep.
He moves on the threat with such grace. And right as he's about to dispatch the Hookhar by driving his scimitars into that soft spot right between the creature's neck and collarbone, it speaks. Now, that's interesting for a few reasons. The other Hookhar that we met, he didn't even try to speak to Drizzt. But this one begged for mercy in proper Drow language. And his first words are, "Please do not kill me." That's
so crazy, unique. So weird, right? Like,
it really took me out of the moment when I was reading it, because I was like, "Wait,
absolutely."
What? You said, and then what?
It's like, what? You're a hookar. Why are you saying that?
Right. It's like at first it's like, could the other hookar speak? And it's just like Drizzt just fought it. And we never found out. Like, does he go home and he's
right.
like, hey, little hookar friends, I was out, hookaring some drow over in Menzo Berenzin and
well,
had a hard hookar day.
It was a little suspicious when there was only one. I feel like hookars travel in packs. I feel like maybe not, but the last time he encountered them, it was a lot of them, right?
Right. When we met this one, it was already banging its claws off the rock. Like, we see it like hitting the stone, like it's frustrated.
Right.
We don't know why, but that's how we meet it. The other hookar we heard clacking, right? And they were going to eat that child and all this stuff.
Oh, right.
So it was a little different. Yeah. But you're right. Now, seeing it as a solo should have automatically drawn some type of attention. So then this takes Belwar and Drizzt, it's a little bit by surprise and leads us into chapter 14. This is where the hookar uses its halting speech in order to communicate, not as I appear. I am Petch. And I know that because Justin said Petch, not Peck. Otherwise, I would have said I am Peck.
Now, again, like listening to the audiobook, he said Petch.
Right.
I should also say, listening to the audiobook, it was extremely frustrating to listen to Petch speak.
Oh,
because
of
all those
snivelly?
I appear, and the audiobook, the reader is very into it, and I'm just like, okay, just read it. Like, I don't know, like I got to the point where I was just getting a little impatient with it. I'm just
like
just
all the long pauses and stutters.
Yeah. It just it got to me a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it comes with having children, and they do that pretty often, where they're just like, and then, and I'm just like,
what?
I sound like a terrible dad now.
So this causes Belwar to literally gawk as he moves up to Drizzt's side and he quips that his hookar is a bit big for a Petch. Drizzt's confused. He's never even heard the word Petch before, I don't believe. But Belwar explains, rock children, strange little creatures, hard as the stone, and living for no other reason than to work it. Now, if he calls them strange little creatures, and Belwar is smaller as a deep gnome than Drizzt, who still isn't above 5 foot, I think he's like 4.5.
Yeah.
How little are Petch?
I feel like Petch would only be like 1.5 or 2 feet.
We're about on the same page, I think.
Yeah, I didn't look it up, but that's how, like, I imagined him as, like...
When we get to my dungeon delve, you're going to understand. I wanted to look him up, but I couldn't because I was torn. So, Drizzt slips in the sly little quip that it sounds a lot like the Svirfneblin. And Belwar is really not sure if it's a compliment or a joke, but he continues, there's not many Petch about, and fewer still look like this one. Justin, could you imagine how much more difficult battles would be in D&D if suddenly the enemies would stop to talk to you?
Yeah. I mean, oh man, especially if they weren't just random encounters,
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I'll just, like, roll a die and then, like, look at a roll table and I'm like, okay, you run into 4 gnolls and, just throw them in there. But if it was, like, what's the word I'm looking for? If it was, like, thought about, if I actually had intention with some of those encounters, like, of course, like, it's hard to do that with every encounter, but if you did that more and it's just like, what are the motivations of these creatures and everything? Yeah, that would make it really difficult.
I mean, imagine you come up on like a squad of goblins, right? And all of a sudden they're like, no, do not kill little me goblin. I have little goblin family and I have, they have no one to take care of them. If I do not come home, I have the fish I'm going to feed them tonight. And there you are. And you're like, do I believe this goblin? Do I care? Now you got to stop and think, like the moral implications. I'm sure most groups would happily stay little murderers, right?
But I mean, but if you don't kill them, then you don't get the experience, and then Zachnafane is gonna get the experience when he kills them later on.
So then the big baddie is gonna have twice the experience,
right?
But you can live with yourself, huh? So, Petch no more. The hookar communicated to the 2 adventurers. Drizzt tried to ask what its name was, but the hookar was only able to shake its head helplessly and say, Petch no more, before actually leaning back to expose that soft spot we mentioned earlier that Drizzt was ready to strike. Drizzt was suddenly not so anxious to kill the creature anymore. He's like, you can't remember your name? What happened? Drizzt presses the monster. You must tell me what happened to you. And the Hookar can only struggle to reply, wizard. Evil wizard. Belwar and Drizzt understood that a wizard had changed him. They've heard of such magic, and Belwar lets it slip that the deep gnomes, they might have even used similar magic when infiltrating, the Menzo Berenson. But not like this, not towards this effect. And Drizzt smiles at the comment because he realizes Belwar really didn't want to, realize what he was saying, that's Drizzt's homeland.
Right.
But he turns back to the monster and says, a pet you once were, and some wizard changed you into a Hookar. It's true, petch no more, the monster replied. Then Belwar chimes in, and it's what I was talking about before. He says, where are your companions? If what I've heard about your people is true, petch do not often travel alone. Dead, said the monster. Evil
he
wizard.
Knew about it.
Yeah. So it's like he had knowledge, but it's like, I guess that's what you were saying. It just kind of boiled over because he's like evil human wizard. Like he knew there's a human, a wizard. He knew what it did. He still had that cognizance about him.
Right.
And the wizard then left you to your pains as a Hookar, Belwar said. He and Drizzt looked hard and long at each other, and then the drow stepped away, allowing the Hookar to rise. I wish you would kill me. The stone. The stone lost to me. And this is the part that honestly hits me the hardest in this exchange, realizing that the human wizard changed him into another creature, but that his identity had also been lost. Petch loved to craft and work the stone. But in his current form, the Hookar is unable to manipulate and interact with the stone the way that it had always been able to.
That's why he was working at the stone and click-clacking away on... Oh my gosh, I don't think I realized that.
Oh, that's what I meant, where I was like, you come in, you don't realize it right away. Yeah. So this causes the former Petch to be filled with such depression that he would rather the two newcomers had killed him than move forward with his new life.
Oh, man.
The former Petch actually realized and was able to understand what it had lost. It tangibly felt that loss and was filled with despair over life without that identity. However, Belwar could understand that. So I had once believed, he said. You are alive, and no longer are you alone. Come with us to the lake where we can talk some more. The Hookar agreed, and it began with much effort to raise its 1/4-ton bulk from the floor. Amid the scraping and shuffling of the creature's hard exoskeleton, Belwar prudently whispers to Drizzt, keep your blades at the ready. Belwar and Drizzt continue to get to know their new friend. They even name him Clacker, and this helps give him an identity to their friend besides just the monstrosity that they see. However, Belwar is still very cautious because he realizes that the monster that stands before them is still a monster.
Yeah.
I mean, it says it's a 1/4 ton of bulk. Could you imagine that tiny little Petch we were both picturing? 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, whatever it was. Which we know that from Belwar talking about them must be pretty small. Suddenly, it's 500 pounds and shaped so awkwardly different.
Right. It would take a lot of... I feel like it would take a lot of time for that creature to get used to where its limbs are,
Yeah, I mean, you can understand here where the wizard is yelling, he's not a Petch or useless and everything else, because Petch are so small and diminutive, and to the human wizard really didn't have as much value. But he gave him this huge body, the strength. Look what I've done for you. I've made you this imposing creature. But he didn't realize he really took away the spirit of what made that Petch a Petch.
Right, totally. One thing I have to say, you're... where is it? They somewhere in there you said they named him Clacker. That was almost my dim light. because I feel like no matter the D&D group, they always find some kind of odd creature, a goblin mostly, usually, and they capture them and they're just like, "Hey, let's call him whatever."
Flip-flop, the talking meerkat under the bridge. That's what we did.
Wasn't a meerkat. It was...
No, it wasn't a meerkat. It was
a mink. But yeah, flip-flop.
So, understanding what it had lost. This is where Belwar could relate. He had lost his hands and now received the hammer and pick to replace them. The difference is that Belwar could continue to do what he loved.
Right, yeah.
Whereas the former Petch would never again be able to communicate with the stone like it had before.
Oh, man.
Beyond that, you see that Belwar cautions Drizzt that it may not be long until the animal side takes over the former Petch, and they lose the ability to rationalize with it. And this is where Drizzt can relate with his new friend. His split personality with the Hunter is actually something that he can see a reflection of when he looks into Clacker. But Belwar cautions him not to see himself too deeply, because there's still magic at work here. Nature can't always be changed, and eventually the hook horror's nature of their new friend will work its way to the forefront, and then they're going to have to be cautious of when that moment, when it comes. And this actually reminds me of the zombie shows. Like, take anyone you want, Walking Dead, zombie movies,
totally.
whatever. The friend, the loved one, whoever, they get bit, and they're like, I can't kill him. He's so nice.
Right.
And then they got to take him. And
do it.
Yep. And then all of a sudden, they're like, we're just going to keep him till the last shred of humanity. And then, he eventually tries to bite somebody, and they've got to kill him.
Yep. Or successfully bite someone, and then you have to kill both of them.
Then now you've lost 2. Way to go.
Right.
That's what you get for procrastinating. Just fold the laundry and put it away already. Goodness. All in all, I got to say that, this part of the story was much deeper emotional analysis than I ever really expected to get into. Yeah. It's weird when then, you take a deep dive into a book and then you find yourself looking at like this reflection of humanity and what it is and inside of it. And I guess what I mean is stay tuned to the Dungeon Delve and we'll get into it even further.
Awesome. My dim light for this week has to do with 2 events that have happened in this part of the book that they had me cracking up. So I just had to make them my dim light. And they were the pranks that happened, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of chapter 12, Drizzt and Belwar just left Blingdenstone. They're now adventuring throughout the caves. Again, they set up a fake campsite to shake off any drow that were following them. And they tried to make their way as far west away from Menzoberranzan as possible, right? Along the way, we got a little bit of a glimpse into the party dynamic. Guinevere seems to have taken a liking to Belwar, as Belwar would often wake up to pins and needles in his extremities, as the 600-pound cat would fall asleep on top of him. Could you imagine that? 600 pounds, Jeffrey.
That's like 3 Belwar.
How did he not die? That's more than 3 Belwar.
I don't know how heavy gnomes are, but you're right. It's probably at least
he's
4
a deep gnome. I
Belwar.
can't imagine he's much more than 100 pounds, soaking wet, right?
Right.
Maybe with his armor on, I guess, if he has
the mithril hand
armor.
and hammer.
Right, yeah.
Although they're light, so I might be overstating that.
But, how did he not die? When that cat would lay on him. But anyway, one night, Drizzt had this hilarious idea. Drizzt gave Guinevere this idea to go lay on top of the deep gnome to the point where he was completely pinned to the ground.
The irony for our YouTube viewers right now.
Yeah, there's the cat.
Standing all over my neck.
That's what cats do. So muffled yells for Drizzt came from underneath the cat while Drizzt, quote, returned from his patrol shift. Really, he was right there the whole time. But Drizzt reacted to the situation in just a hilarious way. Like you said, it was just deadpan, just oh, you two are playing? All right, well, I guess I'll go, right? Belwar moaned that it was his turn to be sentry, right? From underneath his cat, just okay, it's my turn. You can go sleep.
Come back here, get your cat so I can leave.
Right, but Drizzt played it off I'm not tired. You two can keep having your fun. And then went off to continue his patrol while Gwen then fell asleep on the restrained gnome. Belwar was not about to let this act go unpunished. As soon as he saw the opportunity, he struck back. So later in the chapter, Drizzt and Belwar make it to the Cavern of Baruchis, aka those scarlet spitters, which just sounds terrifying. These fungi emit a spore that choke their victims to death if they are disturbed. There is, however, at least one creature that doesn't seem to be affected by the spores, that is the grubbers. Belwar informed Drizzt all about the grubbers, because Drizzt never heard of any of this. Grubbers are essentially large caterpillars or worm-like creatures, right? Just like from Dune, huge worms, maybe not quite that big.
Yeah, not that big, but yeah. Probably even smaller, I would think, than the Beetlejuice worms.
Yeah, I think he said they were 10 feet long or tall, possibly. I forget. Something like that. 10 feet in one dimension. whether it's length or height. But these worm-like creatures...
It's going to give you a totally different worm if it's height.
But these worm-like creatures feast on the Baruchis and are, Belwar said, peaceful enough. As the two carefully navigated through the Baruchis, there was an odd shaking of the ground. And when Drizzt looked over to Belwar to like, hey, what's going on? He turns and he sees Belwar just like bolting.
Yeah.
Just like
you could almost hear their feet.
Yeah, he's in a full sprint toward a small corridor. And Drizzt turns around to see the enormous gray worm. And he quickly draws his scimitars.
I love that's his first reaction is to just like, all right, let's go.
Because then he's just like, that's not going to work. He puts them back, and then he starts running in the opposite direction toward Belwar, in the direction that Belwar is going. Drizzt made it safely to the corridor where Belwar was waiting, arms crossed over his chest, and a, quote, serves you right smirk on his face. Belwar instructed Drizzt to mind where his cat sleeps, or else Drizzt would have even more encounters like this in the future. Drizzt, like, he wasn't even mad. I mean, like, it seemed like he even enjoyed this encounter,
the back and forth,
right?
The buddy. See, this is where, like, if this ever became a movie, you would have, like, that condensed trailer part, and it'd be the buddy part right here. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally.
Like, it would play, like, the gags, or, like, you'd cut to it, and it'd be, like, some kind of the movie from, I don't want to say the word because it's a cuss word, so I don't know if that gets us. The prank movie that everybody knows with Johnny
I gotcha. Yeah.
And it starts off like, hi, I'm Belwar Dissengulp, and this is... And he just starts launching into the pranks. Him and Drizzt play with each other. Oh, there's the panther lays down on him. And, the grub worm almost crushes Drizzt. And they're like, bow, bow. And he's just laughing like in the corner. Everybody's having a great time.
Yes, I mean, he enjoyed it enough that I wouldn't even be surprised if if Drizzt purposefully ordered Gwen to go fall asleep on Belwar again, just to have another similar experience like this.
Well,
because I mean, like he's been in the Underdark before by himself, and he totally like missed out on this whole like interaction with other people, right?
Yes.
And so like, he loves it,
and he's a hardened individual. He is not a kind of guy who's going to go put in for like a mani-pedi, and get the cucumber slices on his eyes. Like, Drizzt is out there swinging scimitars at basilisks and having a blast.
Totally.
So he expects a certain kind of rough back and forth. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this really actually kind of made me think, like, I love that they talked about Gwen falling asleep on Belwar, and then they showed Drizzt saying, hey, psst, psst, come here. Do you understand the plan? You're going to go over there. Yeah? Yeah. All right. Go. Hey, was he doing it the whole time? Like, was Guinevere falling asleep on Belwar because she liked him?
Yes.
Or is it just what Drizzt was saying the whole time?
Man.
Saying, hey, go lay on him. And then he finally got wise to it and was like, you know what?
Right.
I'm going to run you over with a grubber. That's what you get.
You know what? I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, but I love that because,
totally.
again, this book interjects that humor a little bit like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, well, I know we're running like way over on time here, so we still have the dungeon delve to get through.
And our goodbyes.
Let's go ahead and jump into that and get this show keep moving here.
Excellent. So let's bring a little bit of energy into the dungeon delve, because that is the part of the show where we link this week's reading with our favorite tabletop role-playing game. Yep. So I said before, we're going to continue on that same theme. My dungeon delve is the polymorph spell. As we go through chapter 14 of the book, we see the confrontation that they have with the wizard Brister Fendlestick. Excellent name, by the way.
Love that name.
There are a couple of things in this part of the book, really, that I wanted to look at. But the main thing that jumped out at me here, besides Justin's dungeon delve, and I'll leave that alone for him, was the amazing transformation from Petch to Hook Horror that we come across in Clacker. So now, what horrified me was the thought, and it really ended up becoming my dungeon delve, was the condition that Clacker was stuck in. Yeah. Or more accurately, what had caused it. So we know Clacker used to be a Petch, but the wizard Brister Fendlestick had changed him into a Hook Horror and killed his friends. We come across Clacker, and he's visibly a Hook Horror, but explains to our adventurers through halting speech that he is not what he appears to be. The wizard had changed him into what you see. How did this happen? What allows someone to change a creature against their will? They explained that the spell used is polymorph, so I had to look it up.
Yep, totally.
Polymorph is a fourth level spell from the Transmutation School. It requires a wisdom save. The site mentioned that it lasts for an hour, but clearly in the case of the book, we've got a wizard who's maybe doing some rogue experimentation.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Maybe that's where all the acid came from.
Right? You know, it probably was the
before.
wizard at least, but like you know that this guy is out here trying to push boundaries.
Right.
He's not doing normal academic research.
Totally.
The range on this is about 60 feet, and it takes one action to cast. The spell transforms a creature that you can see within range, that's 60 feet, into a new form, such as a hook horror. Now, an unwilling creature, which is what we know the Petch was, would have to save on a wisdom saving throw in order to avoid the effect. The spell also has no effect on a shape changer or a creature with 0 hit points. So if you're a shape changer, or if you're trying to polymorph a shape changed creature like a werewolf, you cannot force that creature to take a different form. Probably because if you think about like the physics of a made up realm, it already has control over its body that changes, so you can't use the spell to do that.
Oh, what would be fun though is if the caster didn't know that it was a shape changer.
Whoops.
And it was like, ooh, I polymorphed him into a sheep or whatever.
Yep.
And then, like, all of a sudden, the sheep, like, a couple actions later, is just like, whoop, back to whatever, you know.
Oh, that's a fun way to play it,
mean?
where he would just, he'd be back to whatever he wants to be. Boom, to change
Right,
back.
it's just like, it's a sheep. Like, the sheep is just, like, wandering around and, like, gets behind the wizard or something. And then, like, all of a sudden, like, boom, back into whatever it was. And, yeah.
Now, this would make sense when you think about it, how this works inside the book, because when you think of a wizard, you'd imagine that his wisdom modifier is quite high. And I'm not trying to punch down at the Petch race, but I imagine they're probably a bit lower on the scale. And, you know, Clacker found himself at quite a disadvantage when he failed his wisdom save against Brister Fendlestick. So for those of you not as familiar, what would happen there is that Brister Fendlestick would cast his polymorph on Clacker. Clacker would take his D20 and he would roll, trying to find out whether or not his wisdom save came in upon the wisdom modifier of Brister. So if Brister has a +8, it would give him, an 18?
I think wizards are intelligence, aren't they?
I don't know. I was just trying to throw out the thing, but you might actually be right, and it's mechanics.
But either way, polymorph might just be like a set DC.
Oh,
or is it the casters?
It had it here that it had for the wisdom save. Now that's on the D&D fandom wiki, or the D&D Beyond. Sorry, D&D Beyond is where I was looking for this one.
Huh.
But anywho,
yeah,
he would have to then roll his wisdom mod. So if a Petch isn't very smart or doesn't have a lot of wisdom, let's say, because smart can be taken 2 different ways. If the Petch's wisdom is low, maybe it's a -1. Now he's rolling a 20, and he rolls a 10. He now has a 9. He'd have to beat that wizard's mod, and you would imagine that wizard's mod is probably at least a 14.
Probably pretty high, right?
Most likely a 16, in and around that range. Probably higher if it's a high-level wizard.
Level. Yeah, totally.
So, the transformation lasts for the duration or until the target drops to 0 hit points or dies. The new form can be any beast whose challenge rating is equal to or less than the target's, or the target's level if there's no rating. The target's game statistics, including mental ability scores, are then replaced by the statistics of the chosen beast, and it retains its alignment and personality. These are key things that you want to mention because of how the book plays off on that. The book keeps his alignment and personality when he meets Drizzt and them. The target assumes the hit points of its new form, that being the hook horror in this, much bigger than the Petch. And the creature will return to its number of hit points it had before it transformed if it falls down to 0. If it reverts as a result of dropping to 0, then any excess damage carries over to its new form. As long as the excess damage doesn't reduce the creature's normal form to 0, it's not unconscious. So in this case, what I mean by that is the Petch might have had hit points of, say, 15, takes
Okay.
damage. He's at 10 of 15. Gets changed into a Hookar. That Hookar maybe has a damage of 60 now. So its hit points would be 60. Because it transforms, it takes on those statistics. If you're attacking that Hookar and you do 60 hit points of damage, it then reverts into the Petch.
Okay.
But he's not unconscious. You're just the Petch. If you do an additional 10 points, because that's what the Petch had left before it transformed. So if you then did 70 hit points of damage, it would take the 60 that the Hookar had, plus the 10 remaining that the Petch had.
Right.
Then it would be knocked unconscious.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep, thought that was pretty cool.
So why don't they just knock Clacker out?
Oh, that would be funny. Yeah, I
but
don't
again,
know.
Again, this is a weird polymorph spell where the wizard is doing something different than whatever 5
Oh, yeah, and this is where we're going to get dark, because this is where the game and the book are a little askew. See, the book sees the Belwar explaining that the spell will eventually have Clacker lose his identity and fully become a Hookar.
That's pretty cool, though.
Yeah, well, yes and no. So when we meet Clacker, he still has his identity. As the spell explains, he has not lost his alignment, and this allows him to seem different to Drizzt. D&D would have this condition end in about an hour, but R.A. Salvatore has used this spell in a horrifying way.
Well, that's what I mean, cool. Like a horrifying way.
Right, okay. I was like, almost like Brister is conducting medical experiments on races that he deems inferior. We're warned that humans are the most unpredictable of races by Belwar. He definitely doesn't understand their reasoning, but experimenting on Petch like this is really a nightmare scenario. I feel like it would even shock the Drow just a little. And I don't mean that like I'm saying they'd be against it. I'm just saying that they definitely take notice of it. Like, ooh, did you hear what Brister's doing over there in Cavern 7?
Right.
And I've always seen polymorph used more as a way to like get past guards or suspicious people. Maybe, like a way for the adventurers to impersonate some big baddie so that they give the orders, like his orders to his henchmen, and they can get a little like workaround so they don't have to fight, or they can bust their friend out. But to think that you're sitting there in a traveling cave tower, right? And using this mobile medical pad to create magical experiments against unwilling creatures is perhaps one of the most horrifying things that I've come across in the D&D world up to this point, at least in these books. Lich Kings and everything else will go much further, I promise. However, the darker side of humanity is definitely brought to the surface just a little bit, because we have real examples in our history where we have experimented on people who were unable to stop it, and the results were, I guess, more often than not, can't say always, right? Always horrifying for humanity. So to see it echoed in literature like this was it's just a little bit shocking to me as well. So I just could not get off of this Clacker and the transmutation to the polymorph. This whole thing was my dungeon delve and my deep dive, because I just couldn't. It struck such a chord in me where I was like, wow, we've got humor in this book. And then in part 3, right in the middle, R.A. Salvatore really goes in there and just daggers you in the feelings.
Totally.
Yuck was something that was just hard to swallow because of how it went down.
I feel like this is almost worse.
Worse, because you're watching him lose his innocence.
Yeah.
That little I am Petch. He wants to smile and talk in a cute little Teletubby voice.
And just
but it's
kind of being like driven,
turning.
being driven mad slowly over the course
and the worst part
days,
is when you meet this wizard, he doesn't have a plan.
No.
So he's
so chaotic.
Yes, what he's doing is just like, well, it's a Tuesday. Oh, hello, little wandering Petch. Come on in. And decides to just go nuts and kill all of them. And like, oh, except for this one. This one I'll turn into a giant monstrosity.
Yeah.
Oh, you go, little Petch. I'm going to go over here to the river. And then we meet him. He's foraging for mushrooms or something crazy on the side, yelling about whatever while he's talking to himself. But meanwhile, the Petch is over there going through it like just the slowest, most cruelest way to lose yourself. It's like dementia, where it takes away your cognizant thought, but slowly, while you're aware of it.
That's wild. And I mean, this isn't the only. This is dark. This is creepy, but it's not the only dark, creepy moment in this part of the book. And that leads me into my dungeon delve. This week it comes from chapter 12. And at one point in the chapter, Belwar and Drizzt stumble upon this pool of acid, right? Belwar and Drizzt both associate acids, like I said, with wizards.
I like to think that they have this moment that's like a Lethal Weapon movie. Have you ever seen it? Where like Riggs looks at Murtaugh and they're both like, acid, acid, wizard, wizards. And then they just go off to go get the wizard. Like,
Yeah,
yep.
totally. But so they both associate this with wizards. It's probably just a wizard's experiment gone wrong, like we said before, and perhaps it was. But as they were crossing over this lake of acid, there came an ominous chant over the fumes. Doom, doom, doom. Or probably more like doom, doom. You know, like more like bird style. I don't know. There I go.
You should remix that for when we come into this for the sound, just so we can get you in the background. Doom, doom, and then you can bring in the doom, doom,
doom, doom, doom, doom.
People will be driving on their way to work with this, and then suddenly get the Doom remix. It'll be great.
Someone put that remix together.
Stitch us on TikTok. Tag us. We'll find you.
So then these creatures emerged. They were like bird-like humanoids. I think they were even described almost like drow-like in some ways as well. They have long clawed hands and feet. Dire Corbies. I don't remember ever hearing about Corys before, so I had to look them up. So the earliest published item that contained dire Corbies that I could find was in Fiend Folio in 1981. It was written by Don Turnbull and published by TSR, Tactical Strategy Rules. The book was essentially a monster manual. And fun fact, the book also debuted the Githyanki as a race, which has grown very popular.
What is a Githyanki?
A Githyanki, it's like I don't even know how to describe them. It's a humanoid, like but it's grown very popular with the release of Baldur's Gate 3.
Okay.
The Baldur's Gate game that just came out. Mm-hmm. They kind of like have greenish skin. They don't look orcish, but they have like their noses are kind of interesting looking. They have long pointy ears, sort of. I don't know.
So they like have like goblin-esque features?
Almost, but I don't know. I think they originated in the astral plane, I believe. Huh. But yeah, I didn't look them up. But they did debut in this same issue of the Fiend Folio nice. That the Corbies did. Excuse me. In fact, the Githyanki race was illustrated on the cover of this book, and apparently that's what helped them gain so much traction in the D&D world. So I'm just like, well, what if they just put the Corbies on the front? But, oh well.
Have these weird mutations of these half-man, half-bird things that can't fly?
Well, yeah, but I mean,
I'm sure they look aesthetically stunning.
So, but Githyanki, like, if they weren't on the cover, like, I don't know, would they have gained as much traction? I don't know. Anyway, it appears that Corbies do have more of a presence in Pathfinder.
Okay.
And less in D&D. So I couldn't find any official stat blocks in my books anyway. And online it was kind of tough to find as well. I did find a number of homebrewed ones. So dire Corbies are described as subterranean predators that resemble humanoid crows with muscular arms and fearsome claws. Though they make their cliffside homes on the walls of underground chasms, where they climb and leap with death-defying agility, they are most frequently encountered in the tunnels where they wait to ambush prey, leaping down from the ceiling to rend and tear. Dire Corbies are intelligent, but have little use for society outside of the rough, squabbling pecking order of their rookeries. I like that because they're like crows, rooks, right? Where their social order is little better than that of the mundane birds that they resemble. Along with their near suicidal savagery, right?
Yep.
With which they launch themselves into combat, dire Corbies are known for their terrifying screeches, songs of doom capable of unsettling even experienced explorers, which, yeah, would totally terrify me. In addition to being savage predators, Dire corbies are also notorious cannibals when it comes to their young, and a mother dire corby must carefully defend her eggs lest a flock of males from the same rookery descend on her nest and devour the unborn children in a flurry of yolk and blood.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
It's terrible.
I mean, we see that a lot in the animal kingdom in real life.
Yeah.
But that just sounds horrible when they say a flurry of yolk and blood.
Yeah. No, I know, like, growing up on a farm, we used to get chickens every once in a while. And, like, we didn't always have chickens, but once in a while, some of the chickens would learn to eat their eggs. And I don't know, like, once they learn to do it, they like it. And so, like, you need to make sure you go out there first thing in the morning to gather the eggs, or else they'll eat them. I don't know.
Crazy.
Birds are crazy. So this ultimately counterproductive tendency only further supports the impression most races have of dire corbies as dangerous, unbalanced beings, and may even explain why the creatures remain relatively rare. So I looked online. Again, I found some homebrewed blocks. They seemed a little underwhelming, especially since these creatures almost killed Drizzt and Belwar, right? The one that I found had an armor class of 11, which might make sense because they're not like heavily armored creatures, but they also only had 11 hit points. So I'll link the homebrew to this creature. I'll link this homebrew into the creature feature on the Discord so you can check it out. But I would encourage our listeners to submit your own Dire Corby stat block if you have one, or make one if you don't, right? Because this one just seems a little dinky. But anyway, that's my dungeon delve. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think you're right, but I also think that, like, I mean, they didn't defeat or almost defeat Drizzt because of their prowess in battle. They did it with overwhelming numbers, trying to suffocate him, and the willingness to dive off a high place with a rock.
Just their suicidal tendencies. Yeah. No, that's
really
true.
all it
that
was. So it wasn't like he was chopping and lopping, right? Going through there like one of those infomercials where it slices and dices and even makes Dire Corby Julian fries. But they presented no real challenge other than their numbers and the craziness, the zealousy with which they approach.
No, I didn't think about that, but yeah, no, that's a totally good point. So I'll post that on the creature feature. You guys let us know if you would change anything to that. But that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for listening. Remember that if you like this show, give us a 5-star rating. Also, make sure you get the most out of this podcast. Pick up a copy of the book and read along with us. Remember, if you don't have time to read, you can always get the audiobook and listen to it during your commute, while you're at work, at the gym, wherever you are. And when you've read the next part, make sure to shoot us an email at drizztdoneright@gmail.com or log on to the Discord to join in on the ongoing discussion there. Remember, we would love to hear from you.
The final bell tolls somewhere out there in the distance, friends. And that lets us know that this episode is nearing its end. So I feel like it's a great place to remind you that if you'd like to donate to this podcast, we do have a link. It's inside near the episode description. It says support this podcast. We take everything that we get through there and invest it to give you guys a better show. Maybe you've noticed that the advertisement that just came up in the show, just part of us growing, getting bigger. And, we're so happy to have you all along for the ride. Anything and everything that you give is always appreciated. We thank you so much just for giving us your time.
Totally.
Speaking of, well, that's it for this time. So, until the next time, it's time to say farewell, friends. Be fair, or play fair, be well.